Aye. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. Not too close. Well, a few weeks ago, and I can't remember exactly when, the feed-in tariffs were drastically cut. Sorry, the feed-in, is that better now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I get an echo here, you see. A few weeks ago, as far as about a few weeks ago, the feed-in tariffs were drastically cut. I think it was about under 5 megawatts, I think. Okay, I'll forget the figures. The important thing was, the thinking behind this was to stop private firms taking advantage of the feed-in tariffs and using up the funds. Well, what happened is that there's a lot of community projects. For example, there's in the Isle of Lewis, in the Hebrides, they were going to have, I think it was a wind power project to produce hydrogen fuel cells for the island's traffic fleet, and they would become self-sufficient without any fossil fuels, hopefully, or at least to a great extent. But anyway, my question is, why didn't the government say, work out a way of exempting community projects, which there could be a charity or a community interest company, which is a non-profit making company, or any other scheme that would be suitable for a community project. And I thought that was a bit of a no-brainer, quite honestly, the way this was formulated. I'm a bit critical about the government here, actually.
Okay, I don't know whether any of you understand what feed-in tariffs are, but feed-in tariffs are basically the price at which you can sell electricity back to the national grid. And originally the idea behind this scheme was to try and make it cheaper for you to put solar panels on your church hall or on your own house, and to sell energy back in to the national grid. So it's a scheme it's designed for small-scale projects. It's not designed for large-scale projects. And all of a sudden, there were a number of private companies who wanted to buy up whole swathes of land in Cornwall and take advantage of the subsidy in order to build wind farms. Now, it's not to say that wind farms on a larger scale aren't a good thing, because they are, but this is simply not what this subsidy was designed for. It was designed to make sure that on a small scale, individuals, small community groups could do something to make themselves self-sufficient rather than whole areas. I mean, it's just a different scheme, and it may well be that there will be other schemes that might come forward for the kind of community projects that you were talking about. So what the government did was to announce that it would be done on a size basis. So anything that's smaller than the size of 2 tennis courts still gets the subsidy, but anything which is significantly larger doesn't get the subsidy. Now, I don't know, there may well be further plans to do something to enable community groups, but this in the first instance was just to stop all of the subsidy being used up by private companies. Okay.
Yeah, but I think some of the organisations that are doing stuff for local groups, local areas, housing associations and so on, have complained that they will be losing out because of
yeah,
this.
but it's got to be a pretty large development, to be honest. I mean, as I said, pretty much anything that's smaller than 2 tennis courts. 2 tennis courts is quite a large development. So
for a council estate, it might be that size, mightn't it? And then they're cannot be able.
But as I said, I'm not saying that there won't necessarily be other things for community projects, but this was very specifically for small-scale projects, and people were, in a sense, taking advantage of a scheme that was never designed for that. It was designed for you to help you do something with your house, and your community group do something with your community hall. And it's not, it's the whole, one of the kind of whole drive behind the government is around energy diversification. It's safer, it's better to produce energy locally. If it's being taken advantage of by large organisations, then you're completely undermining the purpose of the scheme. But there may be something in the future.
In Germany, they have a much bigger cut-off point.
Well, Germany is a bigger country, to be fair. It has bigger land. That's kind of basic geography.
But the economics are the same. I mean, in terms
it's a significantly bigger country.
Okay, let's move on. Viv Stein, did you want to ask this question, or shall I? Doesn't seem to be here. So I'll ask on behalf of Viv Stein. She says, as a representative of the people of Brent Central, why did you vote to sell off our forests?
Well, Our forests are not actually going to be sold off. As you'll be aware, there's been a pause on that. There was a lot of negotiation happening behind the scenes during that period. But that particular vote was a Labour opposition motion. It wasn't a government motion. So Labour opposition motions have no effect on what happens.
Right. Okay. So you couldn't. You're saying you couldn't have voted.
Well, there was negotiation. No, well, I couldn't without leaving the government,
Yeah.
and there was negotiations ongoing at the time that hadn't reached a conclusion.
Okay. Right. We're getting towards the end now. Don't worry. So somebody curious. This may be a bit too technical for you as well. Why are energy performance certificates issued without any enforcement being required for poorly rated properties? Do you know anything about that?
I'm afraid I don't know about that.
Okay.
I do know that the government took a decision on things like HIPs, that we cancelled the packs that you had to have to sell your home, but retained the important information about energy efficiency. But I'm afraid I don't know the detail about why you'd have to take enforcement action.
Okay. Well, that's all the questions that were put into the Brent Friends of the Earth. Are there some questions from members of the audience? Would you like to put a question?
Yeah, I want to ask a question.
Yeah.
The police are going here or there in the car, wasting what you call petrol and energy. You know.
Right. So police and public services, how are you going to bring down their energy use?
I mean, the police locally also use bikes, to be fair. I mean, it's going to depend on what they're trying to achieve. I mean, if somebody's trying to get somewhere quickly, at the moment, the technology associated with greener transport doesn't allow them to do that. And I don't think any of us, if we had a heart attack or were being broken into, would rather have somebody who arrived in a slow vehicle. But, I mean, the police are already, for local use, using bikes and walking. They are walking, but...
See many of them, though.
Well, they do. Certainly, I bump into them. The local police do, and certainly the ward councillors have used their local money that they have from the council to. I mean, Mapesbury, for example, the councillors bought them some bikes to make sure they could get around at a reasonable pace. But that it was just better. It was better all round, frankly, than sticking another vehicle on the roads. But I think we've got to be sensible that. If something serious is happening, if you're being held at gunpoint, you're going to want the police to arrive quickly.
Because you could encourage the criminals also to go on bicycles.
We could, but it might be a longer-term strategy, I'm afraid.
Okay, another question here. Yeah?
Sarah, I just want to ask, he was talking about recycling very much and with children. I think it's not really working for some, because where I live in Stonehenge, I've lived in this block of flat, and it's from 2 to 16, and I'm the only one here, number 12, do my recycling, and
Right.
Just to get a free box, it's not, some weeks they've been out quick till it's overpacked.
Okay.
Still not, I ring them up and I told them, and they said, but nothing's been done.
So the question is how do we get people to join in with the recycling? Because the lady here is saying that in her block of flats, she's very few people are putting out. She's the only one who's putting out the green boxes. So how do we get more people to do that?
I mean, it is a problem that. I mean, obviously, it's compulsory recycling in Brent, which the last council brought in. But if you live in a block of flats, it can be quite difficult to work out exactly who's recycling. So it is more difficult to the stick's not there, if you like. Yeah, no, I'm sure you're right, and certainly when I go around knocking on doors, I've been out this morning doing some resident surveying, and I know when I'm out and about that it's really obvious that some people it can be the only place where one person is recycling, but if you've got a number of doorbells, not everybody is using it. I mean, this is really a job for the council, that the council need to get information out to people so that they understand that they are obliged to recycle and that they have to do that. But I think if you've got practical ideas about how we can encourage people in flats and how we can encourage the council to understand who is and isn't recycling, I think it's worth coming forward with those, because it's not a straightforward thing to fix. And I'm sure that your local councillors, and certainly there's a couple of councillors sitting behind you today, Anne and Gavin sitting on the road behind, they're actually Willesden councillors. But but I'm sure they'd be happy. If you've got an idea, a practical solution, I'm sure they'd be delighted to take it up with the council. It isn't easy to fix. It's a question about how we make sure everybody knows it's their obligation to recycle. They are too lazy. You're absolutely right. That's often the point. People are too lazy, and also sometimes people don't realise.
I think we've come to the end of the time allocated to Sarah. I think Sarah's going to be staying for a little while anyway.
Just a little while, and then I've already started my summer residence surveying. So if you live in my constituency at some point before the summer dries up, I should probably be knocking on your door. So it's what I'm doing today. So I'll stay for a bit, and then I promised to meet the team. We're doing some residence surveying.
So can we have a round of applause for Sarah Tether? Thanks for coming down.